What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Crazy Taco 17 Survival Playlist. This is the gardening part 1 episode where we're going to cover what we found at the gardening store, as well as getting those seeds started and germinating, so that we'll talk about the plans for the hoop house, and in future episodes you'll see the plants being transplanted into the new garden, etc. So we're going to get started here with some clips that I took here at the garden store, and then we'll move on to how I planted the seeds. Check it out. Guys, it's Crazy Tacos. We're out here at a garden store today and just taking a look at all the different stuff that they have. Multiple greenhouses set up here. We picked up some heirloom seeds and different things, getting prepared and inspired for the upcoming shows and videos that I'm going to do, showing you how to garden, so it's pretty exciting. Here we've got some organic, looks like onions and parsley growing, chives, mint. All this is pretty nice, very inspirational. You guys want to get started on your gardens as soon as you can. I'm not sure about these strawberries if they're non-GMO, but you can see how they're planted, just getting going here, beginning of the season. So we're here at this awesome grow store. They have lots of different supplies. We're in the outside area. Tons of different stuff for your garden outside. So we're going to be implementing a few of these things as we get the new garden area set up this summer and spring. Going to be trying to focus on growing food mainly, but as you can see, this place has a lot of interesting stuff. So I'm excited. Definitely going to come back here to get some supplies. Next, we're going to talk about how to get the seeds started. Just kind of germinating in the different cups, getting them ready for planting, and just kind of getting the seeds going. It's still early in the season. From what I understand, this place has quite a bit of action in the tomato and greenhouse areas as well as the season goes on. So probably going to come back here and get some additional footage. Stuff's pretty neat. All right, so we're here, we're checking out this bat house. So this thing, there's a lot of bats depending on where you're at, living in the United States, for example. We have them out here in Colorado. This bat house claims that the bats will eat the insects and things that damage your garden. So this is kind of a neat feature to have. Let's get a zoom in on the description here. Bats are nocturnal mammals with a large appetite for the bugs that destroy our gardens and bother us in the evening. So very cool. This video is meant to be educational and show you my first attempt at gardening. I'm going to have access to this hoop house and garden in just a few weeks, and I'm not quite there yet. So I'm starting off with planting some seeds in these planters and getting them germinated, at least getting them ready to transplant later in a couple weeks. So I'm just showing you here how I'm filling up the different planter pots with the potting soil, just using a Tupperware cup, filling up each one. So it did take a few minutes to get all of them filled with soil. Most of the plants that I'm putting seeds in for today call for them to be planted about 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch off the surface. So I tried my best to get that, but you'll see as it goes here. I'm going to fast forward through some of the work, and you can see the total sum of my efforts. We're going to start off planting tomatoes as the first seeds in the planter, and I have several of those seeds. Notice how I've already filled up the soil in each planter, and I've started to make some little shallow holes in the soil. Here I'm just reading the back of the package, finding out about how to plant the seeds specifically, and I'll be planting as many as I can into this one planter for the tomatoes. And so here I'm just kind of trying to make some shallow holes, and I even tried to get a measuring tape out and measure it, but it's pretty difficult to get that exact 1/4 or 1/8 inch, so I just guesstimated and tried to keep the seeds near the top of the soil as I planted them. So you can try this at home, but I found that the tape measure was not very effective. But you can see how it worked. Here I'm just putting a couple seeds in each shallow hole there, as this instruction is recommended, and dumping out the seeds. Some of the seeds in this video are just unbelievably small. I tried to get some close-ups with the camera, but you can imagine that these seeds are pretty tiny. The tomato ones were actually about average size compared to the upcoming plants that you'll see. But yeah, basically I just tried to get as many of them as I could spread out into the different planter pot. After a little while, I realized it might be more efficient to dig some holes ahead of trying to plant the seeds. At first, these ones were a little bit skinny. It depends on the seed and how far they're supposed to be spaced from each other, but I'm just trying to get a little bit of depth in that soil so it's easy to just drop the seeds in as I go. Now that I've got some guideline holes in the soil, I'm just going to continue to finish planting those tomato seeds throughout this planter here near the center, and then we'll move on to the next type of seed. Since I didn't have enough tomato seeds to fill that whole planter, I looked up another plant that works well with tomatoes, and I got basil out of the internet there. So I'm going to put some basil seeds inside the planter with the tomatoes, at least so that when I transplant them, they can kind of go together. Now the basil and some other seeds were really small, so it was kind of challenging to get the right amount and put them in. You know, this one called for I think 2 at a time, so I was literally picking 2 out of my hand for each little hole there. It was hard to see them even after I put them in, but I'm just assuming and hoping for the best. And as you can see, I tried to plant all the basil that I could fit in this potter plant. Coming up next, we've got the jalapenos. If you guys know anything about me, crazy tacos, I love spicy food. So part of my garden is going to be a salsa garden, tomatoes, cilantro, peppers, etc. So I'm going to grow these jalapenos as well and start them from seed. I realize that not all of these seeds are in appropriate timing, but I am going to have a plastic hoop house, which will hopefully extend the season for me. And otherwise, I might buy some additional plants that have already been grown. In a later episode, you'll see that. There were not as many jalapeno seeds as I expected, but I can always just buy some jalapenos from the store and plant them as well, just from the seeds alone. Also, one really cool seed that I found was these heirloom pineapple strawberries. So I have no idea what my success will be with them, but I love pineapples and strawberries. Those are my favorite fruits, so a mix of them together, who knows, I'm excited for it. And these were another group of seeds that were extremely tiny, so I just did my best. Something that I realized about halfway through this process is I had no idea how to keep track of what seeds were going where, especially as I moved the planters around. So I just wrote down the names of the areas where I planted on a sticky note and kind of added them there for now. I'm going to be putting some plastic domes on the top of these trays as well. to keep the heat in as they germinate. So especially when I store them or set them aside, I'll need to know exactly what I planted where, and so that way it's easy to tell when I go ahead and transplant them into the garden later. Next, I've got these lettuce seeds I'm going to do on the left side. Almost everything that I bought was either organic, heirloom, non-GMO, or all three. When I opened this package, though, I was quite surprised. Look at these seeds. They're very small, so I really just had to take a pinch of each one and kind of, get a few of them in there. Obviously this is my first time, but this is the strategy that I used for a beginner, and I think it's going to work out great. Next, I've got some coriander or cilantro seeds that I'm going to plant. These ones were a lot easier because of how big they are. But I went ahead and put several cilantro seeds in. That's one of my favorite seasonings of all time. Love it or hate it, cilantro is the best, especially when it comes to salsa, tacos, and Mexican food. You can't really have a real taco without onions and cilantro anyway, so this is all part of the plan. Also, I wanted to try my hand at some onions. I'm not sure if this is the best way to start these onions or not. You might as well just put them in the ground. However, I won't be able to get to the ground at my garden for a few weeks. So I'm going to try some of them here, and then I'm going to keep the rest of them stored in a dry, cool place and hopefully use them again later. If they don't last, I'll just buy some other onion plants. I'm not really putting a whole lot on these, but it's a good effort to at least see if it works. With some of the remaining seeds I've got here, cucumbers, this is another thing that's practical to me that I would eat. And these ones were pretty easy. The seeds were fairly large, and it says just to place 2 right next to each other in each hole. And they came in this little moisture tight packet. So I got them out and started to plant some cucumber. Each one of these seed packets has a different amount of seeds, whether it's 100 tiny ones or 15 large ones. It just kind of depends on the plant and I guess the retailer or the person who collects the seeds to determine that. So I did have some seeds that were left over, and I'll plan on just saving them for the next season. This is going to be my only attempt at seeds, and then after this we're going to be looking at plants that have already started as well. Lastly, I'm just going to fill in the rest of my space with these chives. It's way too late to start onions from seed in general, so the chives, garlic chives, are a little bit easier to grow. If you're doing regular onions, you needed to have done this process several weeks ago, is what I'm finding out. Luckily, the growing season doesn't really start until May and June in Colorado, and I have some time to get this going. But these onions are just kind of a filler, and just to see how it goes, I'd like to plant them. So you might ask yourself, why go through all the trouble of making the seeds? It's to know what you're putting in your food. So I'm choosing heirloom, organic, or non-GMO seeds, and I'm also using my Berkey water filter to make sure that I'm putting water that I know about into these plants, and I plan on using that later when I actually water them as much as I can. Obviously, it's going to be hard when the garden gets bigger. I'm going to need to find a larger filtration process. But for right now, to at least get them started, my seeds are not going to be growing up on fluoride like today's youth, so that's great. And I'm optimistic about the results here, so we'll see how it goes. Most of the seeds, say to keep the soil moist. So you don't need to over soak it. You just want to keep it moist, check on it every couple days, make sure that it's not, drying out, and that allows the seed to germinate. When that water is touching the seed is what causes the germination. So you want to have some moist soil. You don't need to oversaturate it. Beneath all of these trays are a separate tray that catches the water, and then I install a dome on the top, which you'll see at the end of the video. So these are the completed seed pod holders here. I've got them marked with sticky notes temporarily until they start sprouting. I'm going to get rid of those later and find a better system. But what's nice about these is that they have these vents, so you can change if the air vents in or out. If you keep them closed, it helps keep the warm air inside, and that's also on the sides too. So these really come in handy. They're pretty cheap. I think overall I might have spent 20 bucks here or so for the supplies, and then maybe another 20 bucks for the seeds. But yeah, so this is the beginning of the garden, and look forward to the next episode. If you guys have suggestions or ideas that you want to see implemented in the show, specifically about gardening or outdoors survival, etc., please email me at crazytacos151@gmail.com. But right on, guys, make sure you check out the next episode in the survival playlist. Check out the channel, subscribe, etc. We'll see you next time.